Hello, I'm Dr. Jacqueline Bond. I'm an academic in the UQ School of Pharmacy. What's my starting point when I think about designing pools? All right, so there's a few things to take into consideration. The first thing is I tend to create my pools based on the topic, so the content area, because I want to be very certain that each student that takes the exam, whether that's formative or summative, receives questions on specific topics. But then the other thing to really think about is, as we know, we can write difficult questions or we can write simple questions on a particular topic. So often what I'll do is then a further sort of level of stratification. So I'll just give you one example from my area. I teach medicinal chemistry for mental health. So I might create one pool called antidepressants 1 mark. And what I'm signaling to myself there is that this is probably going to be a fairly simple question, often recall. But then I might create a second pool, which is called antidepressants 2 marks or 3 marks. And they will be the more complex problems that actually involve some type of problem solving or application. And when I set up the exam, I can draw one question from the antidepressant 1 mark pool and one question from the antidepressant 2 mark pool, and be satisfied that all of my students got both a simple and a complex question on that topic. And then I simply go through my remaining lectures and again repeat that process for all of the topics and all of the levels of complexity. We often need to coach students in learning the vocabulary of the discipline and patterns of discourse and so forth. So really having them have a grasp of the technical terms in a field is often quite important. A question I love a great deal is a fill in the blank question. I think that is a much more sophisticated question than a multi-choice where you're giving the students the answer. And they can be very simple questions, just asking the students for a word that matches the definition, for example. And again, if you go through your lecture notes, you'll see many, many places where you use discipline-specific nomenclature that you want the students to be familiar with. And again, I can think of probably 50 questions that would be fill in the blank questions based on that style of question. It's low level in terms of it's not a higher order thinking problem. It is a level of recall, but it's an important part of setting a foundation for any course. There's quite an art to creating large pools of questions. So sometimes I'm visited by the muse and I have wild creativity, and other times I get a bit of writer's block. So I've got a couple of go-to strategies that I tend to use over and over when I'm stuck. Particularly the application type questions, the more complex problem solving ones. What I often do these days is I try to find graphs or pictures or tables or images. Couple of reasons why. One is when we're using an open book exam, students cannot Google the images or the pictures, all right? So I've got some academic integrity that I'm focusing on there. But often when you're looking at a graph or a table or an image, there's a million questions that you can ask about it. You can talk about what does the data mean? You can talk about the axes. You can home in on particular parts of the graphic. So I use those to great effect, and I can often generate a dozen questions from a single image. So there are certain disciplines where you're going to be using images a lot. So chemistry, engineering, possibly music. So I think that this is a strategy that will tend to work in a lot of different areas.